Hey guys, welcome back to the Woman Up podcast. I am your host, Charlie, and we have Lauren here, obviously, as well. So this week we're going to kind of just delve into a bit of a chatty, kind of chill, topical podcast. There is so much going on in the world right now for women, and we kind of just think, you know what, sometimes rather than going topic by topic, we just need to keep you guys up to date with what is going on, kind of talk about these things and make you even aware of them. I think because sometimes these can really fly under the radar, and if we can bring a little bit of your guys' attention to things that are maybe a little bit more in the subconscious, then it's a job well done. So how are you, Lauren? How's your week been?
Yeah, good. I am just conscious that there might be an echo, so I was just looking around for an echo button, but I think we're okay. Yeah, I think, like you said, instead of diving in too hard on topics, it's like, right, let's every other week we'll just come together and chat about what's been going on. But I turned 32 this week. Woo. So that's been for my week. Turned 32. I went to see Hamilton with Becky and my brother, which was amazing, by the way. If you haven't seen Hamilton, would highly recommend that. And me and Lindsay have gotten together. We're doing a fat loss event, but we are doing it to raise money for our chosen charities, which is good because I'm going to Malawi in June and want to raise as much money for that as I can. So that's just kind of the start, the first fundraising event of the year, which I've started piecing together this week.
Love
How's
that.
your week going?
Yeah, not bad. That's what I've actually turned 32 in 3 weeks, so I'm not far behind you, which is absolutely crazy. Like I've blinked, and how am I like now approaching mid 30s? What is going on? Help!
I actually
SOS.
thought I was turning 33, and I checked with Becky. I was like, am I turning 33? She's like, no, no, you're turning 32. So I've actually gained a year.
Nice surprise.
Yeah, that was good.
Um, so yeah, I've got that to come in a few weeks. I am obviously starting my prep for the LA half marathon, which is on the 17th of March. So 8 weeks, 9 weeks. So
Exciting.
that's very exciting. Very much looking forward to that. And obviously, as we know, there's like a lot going on in LA at the moment. So it'll just be kind of nice to go and catch up with people out there and see how they're all getting on as well, because it's obviously affecting a lot of people in LA. So it'll be a nice little
The
opportunity.
fires at the moment is what we're
Yeah,
looking forward to, yeah.
yeah, to bring people together. Yeah, it's obviously pretty crazy fires going on over there. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for me this week. It's been a bit of a busy one. Obviously, I've got the first intake of the Flourishing Coach going live for 2025. So it's been a bit of like a get everybody on board, get everything on board. And then I think then you have that moment of like just breathe and recenter. So, yeah, I can't believe it's like Friday, but I'm ready. I'm ready for the weekend.
Winding down the week with an episode of women's rights.
Here's everything that's going on in the world.
What a nice way
Great.
to calm down the week.
Oh,
I've been saying to myself that this might be the year for the first half marathon. I need to
do
just sign up.
it.
I know, I think it might be that it might happen. It might be a coastal one in April, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, that was super fun. I
Yeah.
think, you know what, I always, when I started running, I was like, you know what, been, I was a dancer when I was younger, then obviously in the fitness industry from a young age. Running, I never ever got on with. So when I started, I was a fresh beginner, like couldn't run a kilometer without stopping. Like, and honestly, like running for me has been because yeah, it takes a while to like build that skill because you see those incremental changes so quickly. It's like, you know, you go out on your next run and your next run, you're like, wow, that felt that little bit better and that little bit easier. Like, I just love it. Like, I just feel like it's so fulfilling, you know, like the accomplishment. And if I think now, gosh, like I ran a half last year, but it was really last minute and it felt really tough towards the end. So it'll be nice to train for this one properly. But it's mad, isn't it? Because it's like your body's just so adaptive. It just reminds you how amazing your body is. Like, if you'd have asked me 18 months ago that I'd run a half marathon, I'd be like, "Pfft, no.
Well, even
But
the fact that I'm even contemplating a half marathon is like, I would never have thought that. Even though I was a footballer, and obviously you run up and down football pitches all day, but it's not the
yeah,
same thing. I
no,
find long distance running so boring. My brain just like, once my brain has decided it's done, I'm done. And that could be
yeah.
like 5K, 10K, and I'm like, I need to stop now. So I'm a bit like, oh God, what am I going to do for like 2.5 hours?
No, you know what? I think a half is a nice distance. Like people keep saying to me, like, "Oh, you're going to do a marathon." And I'm like, that it doesn't float my boat. Like for that reason, I'm like, running for 3, 4 hours, like 4 hours, 5 hours, just I'd just completely like I'd be so bored. Whereas I think half is quite nice because it's just hitting that time where it's like not quite in that kind of this has taken me all day and I've completely switched off, but like not too fast to be like too explosive either. So I feel like it's a nice little
Yeah,
half a nice middle
I
ground.
feel like I say this kind of well, once you've got an idea in your head, it's going to happen. Now
Yeah.
that it's lodged there, I'm not going to be able to ignore it. So I just need to find one
It's
that.
like an itch, you got to scratch it.
Exactly, exactly. Right, let's go. Let's go. What is happening in
Dive in.
the world? What is happening in the world this week, or the last couple of weeks, should I say? Let's start with the US, shall we?
Oh, yeah, ahead of big changes on Monday. That's rolled around very quickly.
Yeah, so I'm like, where do you begin? Do you know when you're just like, okay, strap in. Loads of things coming out of the US at the moment, which was to be expected because Trump is obviously coming into presidency. He's been elected president. We spoke about this. We knew there was going to be these changes, and there has already been a Title IX change. The Protection of Women and Girls in Sport Act of 2025, which is banning trans students from taking part in sports. We saw this coming. It's awful. It's awful. I
Yeah,
think we've
it's
just been talking about how we grew up in our own sport and how much sport impacts your life and your mental health and your social well-being. Just so many benefits to being in sport and doing exercise from a young age that is kind of being stripped from these trans students.
yeah, and we know that, and I think it's even like when you look at statistics for obviously girls coming out of sport particularly, like we know that's like an oppressed group in society that like we find it hard to be seen in sport. We know how much that affects, or we've seen in data, which we don't have the data for trans kids yet. You know, we've seen it in the data with women of like how that negatively impacts women's mental well-being, physical well-being. Like when we come out of sport, we know how important that sport is for, you know, development and community and so many different aspects of health. And it's almost like to deny people the inclusion of that, whether that be as a child or an adult. It's like it's such a it's such a fundamental thing for so many people. Like we don't even fully realize it yet. I think in society, maybe America's a little bit different because sports a bit more ingrained in their culture, but we don't even fully kind of. We're still moving forward on actually that being such an important thing for us to be pushing kids into and staying in as adults, you know. And the fact that it's like, hey, we're going to take this whole section of society and just not allow them to do that is
Yeah, it's basically
crazy.
completely outcasting them from the other students. You know, imagine you are
Yeah.
the what probably the one and only trans student in your
Yeah.
school and you can't join in. Like it's just telling them that they're different or they're wrong or that they're not that this isn't okay and that they're outcast. Like what is that going to do to the mental health of these kids? It's
Yeah.
terrible.
And we have to think about when these things are passed. It's the same thing, you know, when we spoke about the like changes to abortion laws and things like that, that people think about it of this overarching umbrella. People might say things like, oh, yeah, well, it's not fair or it doesn't make sense or does it? But how is that going to play out actually when you drip feed it down? What does that look like for people in their lives? People probably aren't thinking about that trans kid who now has to sit out of any type of competitive sport that they're doing in school. They're thinking about maybe, oh, categories at the Olympics, but it's like that's not the cascade into people's day-to-day lives that's really going to negatively impact people. Like you've got to think about the drip feed of what this actually means for people in practice. And it's the same thing with the other things that we talk about. It's like, okay, what does that actually look like? What does that actually look like when we start to practice that out? And it's, you know, imagine your kid going to school and being like, I couldn't partake in this running event that they were doing, like competing because they didn't know where to put me, or like I wasn't allowed to. Like, it's just heartbreaking. Like, especially with that kind of thing, is like if that individual is already feeling like they are in the wrong body, all they want to do is feel part of that community that they fit inside, feel a part of. So it's almost kind of just worsening that divide again of the struggle they've already had. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. And I think there'll be a lot of teachers and schools that will really not agree with this, but I just wonder what would be the repercussions for them to ignore it. because all it takes is another teacher or parents of other students to then complain about them and say, this is against the law, they shouldn't be allowed, and like
Yeah.
their hands are tied at that point, you know?
I
How do
think
you...
that's the scary thing we're going to see now, and we've already seen it in terms of like the discussions of potential changes to like in the US of the like education system, removal of the Department of Education, and all of those things, that we're going to see very kind of under the radar systemic change that's going to prevent teachers and head teachers and whatnot from having to making these decisions, because like you said, the hands will be tied. You know, it might be you've got the choice, but if you make this choice, we're removing your funding. If we make this choice, your school's going to close down, but you've got the choice.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
kind of, you know, that's how these things come about. It was the same with when America administered the COVID vaccines, and they were all like, you've got a choice, it's your human right to have a choice, but if you don't get it, you can't get health insurance, and also you can't get your medical at work, so you won't be able to work, but you have a choice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's just like what will come next? Like what propaganda is then going to be pushed into schools to boost Trump's agenda? Like it's giving Hitler vibes, you know? It's like they're already saying you cannot teach LGBTQ lessons or about same-sex parents, or you know, you can't have trans kids in sport. Like this is just the start of his bigger agenda, and it's like, and then obviously removing the education. It's just like what is coming next?
yeah.
What
And
is
it's
coming
even
and at
down to
what
like,
speed as well? It's happening. It's going to be like this. The guy's got 4 years. It's going to happen like quick.
and it's the things about removal of things like critical race theory, of like they're removing from there. So anybody who doesn't know how like the American education system works, they don't really study like world history. They study American history. So they're already quite when we're saying like, oh, this has got parallels with Nazi Germany or da da da, like there's quite a lot of people that aren't massively aware of those things because they don't necessarily get taught them like our education system teaches them. And in American history, there's this kind of push now to actually removing anything that like America did wrong in history. So it's kind of when we're talking like critical race theory and the role that America played in actually forming slavery rather than just abolishing slavery, is like omit that bit because it's not patriotic. And it's just this really dangerous kind of, like you said, this propaganda hole, which does give very Hitlerish vibes of kind of feeding people a very kind of set story and changing people's perception, which is quite scary.
Yeah. So what else in the US? Big stuff coming from Mark Zuckerberg and Meta. So Meta is ending its diversity, equity and inclusion programs, known as DEI. It says, instead of equity and inclusion programs, Meta plans to build programs that focus on how to apply fair and consistent practices that mitigate bias for all, no matter your background. So what they're saying is we're removing anything structurally that actually helps us stay diverse. And instead, we're just going to rely on, we're all going to be unbiased, aren't we, gang? Yeah, we're definitely going to be unbiased when we hire and all of that. And it's, oh my God, it's,
That for me, and obviously that's not just exclusive to the US, right? Because it's going to affect every single one of us listening to this that use Facebook, Instagram, like that, they're Meta apps. So we're right. There's going to be pros and cons to this because I've seen this on both sides. The obvious cons, which I'll obviously dive into, but people are also talking about the freedom of being able to talk about things that maybe would have been censored inappropriately. So, for example, shadow banning because you talk about abortion. You know, like for example, like we couldn't really openly use the word abortion a lot on the Woman Up Instagram because there would be a censorship there of that. It's the censorship currently isn't like, oh, you're talking about this in a way of like, you shouldn't have one and I own your body. We should censor that because that's very inflammatory. It doesn't know the difference, so it just kind of shadow bans everything. Similarly to like, I don't know if you've ever done like, if you type like disordered eating into TikTok, like it'll shadow ban it, but people find their way around it by like, you know, putting in little asterisks and things like that. So there is that side of like, you know, there'll be certain things that maybe aren't censored. You know, people have spoken about the kind of like the conflicts in like Israel and Palestine. Will both kind of sides have equal coverage because now they're not kind of shadow banning one side. But it's like, do the cons far outweigh the pros in the sense of actually we're going to see such a shift in what's allowed to be said and actually not protected against. Like I think there was an example that was like it wouldn't censor something like women being referred to as household objects.
Yeah, so you're referring to they're ending the third party fact checking essentially. They're removing the fact
Yeah.
checking for free speech. And Mark Zuckerberg has said, I've been put under too much pressure for too many years now to censor things. So now I'm just going to let everybody say whatever they want to say. Fine to a point, but now, LGBTQ plus community people are allowed to be called mentally ill, and women are allowed to be referred to as household objects. And I mean, they're just two tiny little examples. You'll be able to say anything you want and get away with it. Anything. There's no fact checking, there's nothing. And this is because he's probably been put under pressure from Musk and Trump, because they need to say what they want to say. It'd be complete bullshit, just total lies. They can just say whatever they want to say and get away with it. They can already do that on X because Musk owns it. Now they
Yeah.
need to be able to do it on Facebook and Instagram. So they've gone through Mark Zuckerberg, and it's disappointing. It is disappointing. Like, the pros do not outweigh the cons on this, because
No.
the long view of this is politically they're going to put out whatever they need to put out so that people over here will start voting for who they want to get into power over in the UK, which is not the
Yeah.
Labour Party or the Lib
No.
Dems.
And
It's
this is this
all
weird
UK.
kind of yeah, exactly. Like, and it's this weird thing that again that Reform are kind of pushing as well. We can see that echo on this side of the pond. Like, that free where did we somehow get this thing where that free speech means that we can say anything? It's never meant that. It's never meant that. Like, go on the government website, it has never meant that. Free speech means, oh, our values can be different. Free speech means not this is not how I view things, but this is the first example that came to my head. You are you're gay and I don't agree with that. We can hold different values, but it doesn't mean that I can come and call you a really homophobic slur in the street. Like, that's a completely
Or
like
just make up utter lies about a group of people. Like,
yeah.
free speech is not lie. Make things up because you're free to do so.
No, and it's not I can say like the inside thoughts still exist. Free speech means like we can hold different values and live differently and practice different ways of life. It doesn't mean you can actively inflame, insult, lie. Like, it's never meant that. And I think there's this weird thing where people are like, well, free speech, isn't it? And it's like, that's never been in the law. Like, you can do,
Literally,
if you can't do it on the street, you can't do it on social media. Like,
well, the thing is, it's moving to the street. Like, that's the scary thing, is like people aren't having to hide away their, terrible intrusive thoughts anymore. When you've got people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Andrew Tate and all of these people leading the way, saying and doing whatever they want and getting away with it, people aren't going to have to even be like trolls anymore. They can
no.
they can just fucking say it and then be like, yeah, it was a lie, yeah, it was abuse, yeah, it was wrong, but free speech, hey. Like,
Yeah, it's petrifying, and we've seen it with like Andrew Tate, like how hard it's been for them to pin him down, to actually get evidence of anything when he blatantly like says these awful things about people and about women and whatnot, and that's just somehow just not, well, he's not breaking any laws. How? Like, how? And I think, I don't know if you've travelled out of the UK in the last few months, but we went to Amsterdam and we checked in, and they obviously take your passport, don't they, in a hotel, and they're like, oh yeah, da, da, da. Oh, you're from the UK. Oh, it's a bit crazy over there at the minute, isn't it? And we were like, this was November. And we were like, what? And they were like, oh, people are getting put in jail for like saying things on Facebook, like you're losing like your freedom of speech. And we were like, no, they literally told people to go and firebomb mosques, and people did. So yeah, like they should be in jail. Like, and they were like, oh, but freedom of speech. And we were like, people in other countries, because the media are portraying it as this, actually think people in the UK are losing their freedom of speech because someone said something hateful and got put in jail. It's like, do we not live in a society where that's a good thing? Like, we want that. We want people to not be able to say such inflammatory things that have consequence and get away with it. That doesn't make for a nice community or culture.
But there's people in the UK that believe the same thing, believe the same things about their own country. It's like, you live here. You're aware of what's going on, are you not? Like, and they're like, we can't say anything these days. We can't do anything these days. It's like,
Well, if you
whoa.
no one that I know that isn't that is like not misogynistic or homophobic or any of those other or racist has had any issue with worrying about what they can or can't say.
Yeah.
Like, the people that I know that are those things feel like they need to be clipped, and it's like, maybe that's just a sign that you should never have been able to say those things out loud in the first place.
Yes, exactly. So, so I don't know what's going to come off the back of this, but obviously, so they've removed the fact checking, but then they've also removed the diversity, equity, inclusion programs, meaning like, so their hiring of staff and their diversity. And Mark Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I'm not going to listen to that, but it's been well known that he said there's not enough masculine energy and men in the workplace, and yet 2/3 of his staff are men. So what are you saying there? If most of your staff are men, but there's not enough men and masculine energy in the workplace, like, what is that saying to his staff that are there, for one? And really, what is he saying? He's saying to Joe that him and his buddies, Trump and Musk, just want an army of controllable white men robots that just are not vulnerable, not creative, I suppose. Like, these, I don't really know what they think masculine energy is that they want, but it's not anything positive for people in minority groups.
No, and I think the figure was like 37.8% of employees at Meta are female. So it's like, you don't have an issue with that. Like, or if you do, like, what do you mean? Use your words. Tell us what you mean by that. You know, like,
also, like, women can have masculine energy. So what do they do? The whole thing is just like, what is happening over there? Like,
and like, with like the DEI thing, like, really, like, with like diversity, inclusion, etc., and like, because people will jump straight to like, oh, people are being hired because they are female or because they are a person of color or because, and it's like that's never what is happening with this. People aren't losing jobs because they're a better fit so people can tick a box. That's never what DEI has been about. It's about actually giving people equal representation. We know there has been studies that have shown people 2 CVs with the names omitted, and actually when they are read as for like blank, great CVs, when you add the names and they're read again, if they are a female, they are like, oh, this person is bossy, wouldn't work well in a group, wouldn't collaborate. But if they're read as a male, it's a leader, he's authoritative, you know. So we know that things like gender bias play a massive role in things like hiring. So
they've done the same studies with race as well, where they've got identical CVs, and people have read through the CVs and said what they think, and then when they see the picture and there was a white man and a black man, it changed their hiring process and their thoughts and their thinking. We know this. So these programs are so important to allow that diverse hiring process, and we need diversity in, well, everything. Yeah. And statistics also show that businesses do better with more diversity and like more creativity and more imagination, and people at work are happier when there's a more diverse range of people. It's like with feminism now, it's like we know we need men on board, but we have to almost show men why it would benefit them too. It's like we've got to say to these white business owners, it will benefit you to hire someone of colour or a woman, or, you know, but it actually does. Yeah. So to remove these programs and then just say, promise we're not going to be biased, is an absolute load of shit. And they know that they're talking absolute shit. They know what they're doing.
And we've seen that. And a perfect example of this is, you know, within the first few days of the fires in LA, breaking and it going on to the news. I don't know if you saw the news coverage from Fox.
Yeah, they started blaming female firefighters and
yeah. It was literally Fox News, which is obviously they're in Trump's pocket, as we know. They were lit, and I could not believe, and I think that's, I guess, it's maybe more subtle in the UK than sometimes it is in the US. When I watched it, I was like, I cannot believe this is on people's TV screens. It's just so blazing. Had a picture of the three, like the top three, let's just say for now, people in the LA Fire Department. So your fire chief and the people underneath that fire chief, saying, well, this is the your top of your pyramid. I hope they know what they're doing. And they were all women. Mm-hmm. The only reason he was saying that was because they were females in positions of authority. And it's like, that wouldn't have been a news point if they were men. Mm-hmm. Like, and it would never have been their fault. It would never have been, oh, your safety's at risk. Do they know what they're doing? Because they're women. And then it went twofold when they realised that the fire chief was part of the LGBTQ community. They went even harder on her as being a DEI hire, when actually she was overqualified for the position that she holds. And it's kind of like, these people aren't... Yeah, well, that, again, we know it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that we have to be overqualified to get a position to justify that we're not a white straight man. Like, and these people aren't being hired because they tick the box of being female. They tick the box of being in the LGBTQ community. They're being hired because they can do the fucking job and they're good at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a similar thing happening in the military over there as well, where they're trying, well, some people are trying to remove women from serving in the military because they're saying they're not as fierce, they're just not up to the job. And the woman was coming back to him basically saying, you have absolutely no statistics on this at all. We have the statistics to show how valuable women are in different sectors of the military and the roles that they've performed on the battlefield and not, and behind the scenes, and we would not have gotten as far as we have without these women in place. Here are the statistics. And he was just a bit like, well, I just don't, it was just his opinion against actual statistics. But yeah, it's like, again, we talked about this on the Trump episode about what is this going to mean as far as women being forced back into the home and removed from the workplace, and the LGBTQ community and people of color. Like, there's so many things that are going to ricochet from Trump being in, and it's all happening now, blaming women for the fires, trying to remove them from army and whatever else. This is just the start of trying to get women back in the home. Hashtag Handmaid's Tale.
And it is, I think it does come from, because if you look at, and again, it's like, when will we learn our lesson? When we don't comment dive and start to get involved. But if you look at the comments on these things, don't do this if you want to have a quiet life. If you don't want to have constant anxiety. I looked at the comments on that video that was about the fire chief, like on Fox, and obviously it was on like a feminist page, so everyone was being like, this is outrageous. Of course it is. And there was a guy that had put about, like, it's taking rights away from men. Because I think that rhetoric that is going on is that white straight men are losing out, but it's like, and I've heard this phrase and I was like, oh, that just summarizes it so well. Equality feels like oppression when you've spent years benefiting from race and gender privilege that should never have been there in the first place. It's like we've been unrepresentative for so long that moving the needle to actually a representation of society, it doesn't actually, that's the thing, it doesn't take away from men. Like, no one's losing out. Like, if you actually ask these people when they're like, oh, it's taken away from men today, it's like, okay, give me a concrete example of how it has negatively impacted your life or taken an opportunity away from you personally. Mm-hmm. You cannot give me one.
If all of this diversity and all this progression and all of these things happening is having such a negative impact on men, why is the gender pay gap still so big? Why is the pension gap still so big? Why is gender-based violence at its all-time worst? Men are not having it any worse by other people being in positions of power or at work or, like living in a more equal society. Men benefit from that too, but there's just a lot of men who just cannot see it that way. And if a white man was hired in the job that they didn't get, they'd just be like, well, I just didn't get the job. But if it's a female, it's, oh, they had to take the woman box. If it's somebody with a disability, oh, they had to take the disabled box. If it's a black person, oh, they had to take the like. If it's anybody not themselves, then it's been stolen from them because it was their job. Entitled, so entitled. They just do feel they are entitled to whatever they want. If they want a job, they're entitled to it. And if somebody else gets it that's lower down on the pyramid than them, then they've stolen it from them because it was theirs to begin with.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, you know what? And there are men that are like, holy shit, like when you realise this, because just dropped my notes. Like me getting angry. Because I live with one. Like my partner is like, oh my god, like have you come across this? I didn't realise this. And when you start opening their eyes, they're like, that is insane. And again, the anger is then directed to the group of men that are kind of like pushing these agendas. But like every single day, Dougie will come home from work and be like, oh, I was talking to this guy in work today, and it is just this rhetoric we're talking about, and you just think that is like, I sometimes forget, because we are quite aligned when we talk in the house, how kind of a large majority of men actually think and what the kind of wider rhetoric is. And it's really scary. Like, it's so scary. And we see it, like, you know, we both work in health, nutrition, fitness industry, which is predominantly a male dominated space. You know, we see it in things like marketing, for example. Like, a guy can just say something and be believed. Like,
Yep.
just say, and then it's like, yeah, cool, buy this thing, buy into my program, do that. They're just like trusted. It's like that unconscious privilege, and it is harder to be taken seriously, and it shouldn't be that way. And actually, DEI facilitates actually a better representation of society, but also, as you said, that equal opportunity that we all benefit from. And yeah, the fact that it's being spun is that it's taking away from men and also taking away from society is quite sad, because like you say, that's not what we see. That is not what we actually see in the data.
It's not what we see. It's not what we see in our eyeballs. It's not what we see in the data and the statistics. It's not anything, but it's just what they have in their heads. And it's like, how do we get more men to realize? And that's.
And again, it's like, again, like you say, you see it like with our eyeballs, with our lived experience. Again, I'm just going to use this as a bit of an example, sort of cross section in my day-to-day life. Like these men that Dougie will tell me about when he comes home from work that do believe this rhetoric and are very kind of in this mindset, they are really unhappy. They hate their partner. They like all of these things. And it's like, he'll sit there and be like, oh no, well, like we share all the stuff in the house, and like, yeah, we have a laugh together, and like and it's kind of how do you not see that it doesn't have to be this kind of like men hating women and I'm hard done to, and does it, like, it will benefit your quality of life when we all come together, whether that's professionally and personally, and the knock-on of that, because as we know, if women are also able to get access to like higher earning roles and contribute more to the household, that takes the pressure off of men, which positively impacts men's mental health as well. So it's yeah.
I shared on my stories yesterday about the TED talk that I'd watched about a man who was trying to recruit other men into feminism, and it was a really good talk. And you know, he came out with the statistics on how when household chores are shared, the children in the house do better at school, less likely to take recreational drugs. Like, he just reeled off all of these positive things for the children, the wife, and the husband.
Yeah.
So everybody benefits when a man takes on just as much of the household chores as the woman. Anyway, there was loads of stuff in this TED talk that I really liked. Made a whole little reel about it. Googled the guy just to be sure that there was nothing on him, in case you don't want to post something and then a bunch of people comment like, did you not know? And yeah, sexual assault allegations against him, and then he retired after they came out, and I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I found a guy finally recruiting other men, and he's out there sexually assaulting women, which, when you look at the statistics, I suppose I'm not surprised, but it's just so, disappointing. I was just disappointed. I was just so disappointed, because I thought, I found somebody who's saying all of these things and recruiting men and showing men, like, look how it will benefit you and your life. Like, he finished it off with saying, like, men get more sex from their wives when they share the household chores. If that's an incentive, fine. If that's an incentive, whatever. but it's statistically proven.
Yeah.
Like they will benefit from.
And it is like that's the one that makes men's ears go back up.
Exactly.
Oh, it is. Oh God, what was I watching this on? It was some kind of like account which was like like sex therapy and like talking about the difference of like the way that we've been taught. This is a bit of a tangent, but we love a tangent. With the way that we've been taught about like intimacy and things, which is I'm sure something we will talk about in a future episode, is very kind of like performative and like it's the candles and the lingerie and the kind of, whereas actually what women's intimacy is a slow burner, right? So it's like actually what intimacy is for women is like being valued and being listened to. And yeah, do you know what? I'm probably going to be really up for it if you've spent the day making me feel seen, put that shelf up, helped me with these chores and taken that mental load off so that when actually I get into bed, I'm not absolutely fucking exhausted because I've been having to manage the mental load all day. Like, and yeah, like it does have then a positive impact on what they always fucking moan about, that like, oh, she don't get anything and da, 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 da. General men, not saying anyone in particular, like they always seem to kind of moan about that they put on as women's fault, but then actually then that helps the connection in the relationship, and then it's just the ripple effect is massive on everybody, and yeah, it's just
What's circulating at the moment is Tom Holland's performance doing Rihanna. You know, he dressed up in like
yeah.
spandex stuff. He did Umbrella and all of that, and it's recirculating now because women are like, this sent us over the edge, men. Look, he's like embracing his sexuality. He's having fun. He doesn't care. He's not trying to act this macho thing, and women just like flock to Tom Holland. And it's just women going like, we're not looking for the thing that you think we are in the
No.
bedroom, in life, like this macho persona, this hard, I don't feel, I'm not vulnerable, I'm not scared of anything. Like that isn't
That's
what
a
it's about.
that's a massive turn off. Like as like the heterosexual person here, that I could not turn me off less more. Sorry, when it comes to men, I was saying this to Dougie actually because he's very in touch like his feminine side. Like we always talk about how like gender and sexuality are fluid. Like they're not fixed, right? They're a spectrum. They're completely fluid. And I am 100% more attracted to men that are more emotionally available, that are like more on that kind of feminine side of the spectrum. Nothing turns me off less than a really toxically masculine alpha man, because it just makes me go, oh, it's just no. So it
Yeah.
is wild how this kind of things come out of like this is what women want, and it's like what women? Because none that I know.
Yeah, what women want is like help around the house and just to
Yeah.
not be beaten at home. Like just, basics.
Make me feel safe, not like you could turn on me at any moment, you know?
Yeah. Right, we've gone in on the US. Oh, do you know what? We didn't touch on Musk. I put Musk might buy TikTok from the Chinese. There's like leverage in negotiations with, tariffs and whatnot, but I don't know if that's going ahead. It's obviously what's been in the news recently, and part of their whole, well, we've told Mark Zuckerberg what's what. So we've got Instagram and Facebook. Musk has X, and now obviously it's like get the full package.
Yeah, which would be petrifying if that does go ahead. Like we were talking about this last night, that um, it used to be the whole thing of like, and again, the parallels of like Nazi Germany. It's like they would control like the media. You got to remember, by the way, Hitler was voted in by the German people because he was a strong leader who was going to revolutionize Germany and bring all this amazing stuff back to the German people. Like he was voted into power for that. It wasn't like he just came in and was like, I'm going to start oppressing everybody. Oppression then became the vehicle to do that. And the parallels of like them controlling the media and like feeding propaganda, it's just history. But now it's not print media and it's not radio media, it's social media, because that is where, and they will have all of these statistics because they have all of the access to these statistics. Where do people now get their information? Cool, well, if we own these platforms, if we remove DEI, if we remove fact checking, if all of this stuff, we have control of what people see, think, believe. Think about the political landscape if he does buy TikTok. Like then you say you've got Zuckerberg, who's now just bending the knee to Trump and Musk, which is just like, wow. And also the least masculine thing that you can do, the irony. Yeah, let's just bend the knee to these men. And yeah, you got like obviously Zuckerberg, Zuckerberg and Musk with TikTok and Twitter. Think about the political landscape that they get to actually shape so much of what so much of the population see. Hey, yeah, we're not going to talk about the Democrats doing this amazing thing. You're not going to see that because it's going to be shadow banned. We are going to be pushing it. It's petrifying, absolutely petrifying.
Well, yeah, they'll control it from not just in the US, but all over the world. And I guess that would move us on swiftly into the UK then, because of Musk trying to get involved with UK politics, which you just think, how is the richest man on earth, who's just a tech guy and into cars and rockets and spaceships, got anything to do with UK politics? Just leave us alone. But this is just, yeah.
At what point do we go, why are we giving him any airtime? Like,
And
if
you know
some
what?
random American guy just started going, well, I don't think Labour should be like, would we be giving him the same platform? Like, what? Stop, just stop. Doesn't matter. Shut it out. Why do we
But Keir
care?
Starmer has actually, defended, and we'll talk about the Jess Phillips stuff, but he has actually defended her, and he has said, like, who are you? Why are we listening to this rich guy? Like, we don't care about you, and we're not going to listen to you. And I was like, thank you, because he could easily be swayed.
And yeah, and that's what we need. That is a leader. That is a leader who says somewhat, I'm not going to say everything that Labour have done and everything in Labour's policy is great and amazing, but a leader calls that shit out. Do you know what I mean? And goes, get back in your box.
I mean, could you
Like,
imagine if Boris was our prime minister now,
oh,
and this was all going on? He'd be putty in their hands. He'd be just doing whatever. I just can't imagine he would be defending us and looking out for women's rights in the way that Keir Starmer and child abuse, because that's what we're going to be touching on now.
and just a side note before we dive into this, by the way, something that my brain has always been like boggled about. Trump and all of that kind of the more like fascist side of views are all doubling down on foreigners are the worst thing that's happened. Foreigners this, get them out, get them out. Elon Musk is South African.
Yeah.
Like, I think just look at the things they're saying and the practice, and it's everything is hypocritical. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, what? So it always then comes back to. I know we're kind of tangenting off from women's rights here, but it comes back to again. It's racist agenda. Oh, you mean foreigners if they're brown skinned? That's what you mean.
Yeah.
Not foreigners if they're white skinned.
Yeah.
Like, then it's racist.
That's exactly the experience that I had living out there, because as Trump was being elected the first time round, a lot of people were like, oh, the immigrants are coming in and they're taking our jobs, and that was a big push for them of why they wanted to vote for him. And I was literally stood there like, what? I'm literally an immigrant. I'm literally working here from a different country. Like, and they were like, yeah, but not you. And I was like, but I'm a foreigner in your country working. And they were like, yeah, but not you, and I'm like,
no. So tell me what you mean. Like,
speaking, and I'm white, isn't it? That's what it was. You could see them a bit rattled, but that is what it was completely.
yeah. And it's actually when you actually double down, you go, no, like, say it how it is. Say what you mean. Like, and it always does come down to those very either, like, if we say racist or misogynistic views behind those agendas.
I didn't stay in America was because it was so difficult to get a sponsorship, because if you want to work there and be sponsored, the company you want to work for have to put that job out to US citizens first. And if there's somebody better for the job that's a US citizen, they get it. So it's not like an immigrant just hop over the border, be in America and start thriving. Like, that's not how it works. But again, it's just what they're fed through social media, and that's why it's so worrying about what they're going to put out. And then to relay it back to women's rights, well, when you've got a man in power who has been found guilty of rape and sexually assaulting and abusing multiple women, what do you think they're going to start putting out? What do you think they're going to do as far as women's rights and protecting women over there?
Yeah. And again, the things that will be allowed to just be said, done, women's quality of life when it's, we saw it with, like, when he did win the election, like the whole kind of cascade of that the week after, of people saying things like, little lads going into school and saying to little girls, like, your body, my choice, because they've seen Andrew Tate say it. and that's how it then changes, that these little girls hear this stuff in the playground because it's acceptable to be said. It's not just, yeah, it's these big overarching things, but it's actually the quality of life issues on a very day-to-day basis as well, that it's like, I'm sure that none of us would want our children to be exposed to.
Yeah, yeah. It's a scary time, and I have American friends that live in England that are having children and planning children around their time in England to have them make sure they're in school here from an early age and not there, and to use the healthcare here.
Yeah.
So what
Crazy.
were we saying about in the UK? So the Musk Phillips story is that Jess Phillips is a Labour MP, and she has dedicated her life's work to protecting women and girls against gender-based violence. She is awesome. She's great. She has been known in the middle of the night to drive out and go and help women and get them from danger and drive them to a safe space. Like,
Yeah. And
she
like,
is.
just a bit of like her bio on that, like, she actually worked for Women's Aid prior to getting into politics. Like, she has always been an advocate
She
for
was
women's
managing
rights.
women's refuges. She has always been, a pioneer for women's rights. And I'm pretty sure the role that she's in now, did I write it down what it was called? But I'm pretty sure the role that she's in is like a brand new role in the
Yeah,
government.
she's the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls.
Yeah, I think it's a new role. I think she's pretty much just like trailblazed her way through and then like doing this amazing work. And then in comes Elon Musk, a billionaire from America, who is endangering her life by basically saying that she's making wrong decisions regarding national and public inquiries into this gang of women sex traffickers and groomers. And I'm kind of butchering how I wanted to say I'm butchering this, but basically she wanted an inquiry that was actually going to elicit change and follow through with actionable steps to protect children and women against these groups, because she has seen that when you run, what was it? I have it here in my notes.
They had that inquiry in 2022. Like,
Yeah, and they had points that they were going to action off the back of it, and so she's doing the work. But he's come in and said, no, you should have done like a whole public national inquiry and should have done it the way I would have done it, and that he called her a rape genocide apologist. And other people are now jumping on the bandwagon saying like, yeah, you're not protecting women, you don't care, you don't. Oh, you think Elon Musk cares about women's rights in the UK? You think he's protecting women, not the woman who has spent her life's work protecting women, and it's put her life in danger and under threat, and she's now got to tighten security and now obviously fear for her life because of this awful man. And it's like, what really grinds me about this is, I guess, the irony that a woman who is doing such good work for violence against women is now under threat as a woman against violence. It's
yeah.
like, how are you not seeing this? How are people not recognizing this? And like I said to you the other day, it's like parallels with the murder of Joe Cox in 2016. And if I was her, I would be worried for my life, because there are people jumping on this Musk Trump Tate bandwagon that are agreeing with them and saying like, that don't really understand what she's doing and who she is. They don't even really care. They just hate her.
And like, we say this as like, before we talk about this stuff, like, we get ourselves informed, right? Like, in our house, like, we watch PMQs and stuff like that, like, fresh from the source. Like, we won't read the headline. Like, we watch it and make our informed choice before, you and I have gone and done our own research on this stuff before we're talking about them for these things. There's a lot of people that aren't doing that. They are forming the opinions based on this person said, that is always based on agenda. And like you say, if you look at the reasons why this is happening, that first inquiry in 2022, there was an 18-point bullet point action plan that came off the back of that Labour are currently rolling out. They are trying to pass one of those bills right now. And this whole thing has come in of like, oh, you should have a national inquiry. So are we sitting here and saying we don't know the ins and outs, and are we saying, there was some things that the police should have done better in that instance? Yeah, there absolutely may have been. But what Labour are trying to say is we need to get this fucking action passed so we can put the laws in place to protect women and girls. She's actually said, we will, if you want a national inquiry down the line, we will absolutely do that. Please let us get the laws passed first that have come off the back of this first inquiry 3 years ago, so that we can protect people, and then we will deal with that. What you have to look at is people like Elon Musk are holding the police to account because of like racial things, like that potentially have held them back from doing their job, is the kind of narrative around it, above violence against women and girls. And the fact that they're using violence against women and girls as a vehicle, like they're using them to further their political agenda, is disgusting. Like, you don't care about that, just so that they can actually hold Labour to account, to smear Labour. That is what they're doing, and it's vile. And actually, if you look at what's going on, nobody's saying that's not going to happen. They're saying it's not happening right now, because guess what? These laws matter more. And the fact that, I'm not just saying this as like my own political agenda, but it's looking at it as it is. The Conservatives had however long to action those bullet points, and they didn't do it. They didn't take any of that action off of that inquiry in 2022, nor did they go, we're going to call for a national inquiry. But they're doing it now because it furthers the political agenda to smear the opposition. So it's like, where the friggin' hell were you? Where the hell were you for 14 years ago? Where were you 4 years ago? Where were you 3 years ago after the inquiry? Not doing anything that helped women and girls. So don't pretend that you care about it now when you only care about it to further your agenda. And it's the same thing with Musk, again, wading in. Yeah, because guess what? It's going to help people to bolster the kind of reform ideology of like, yeah, these immigrants are raping and pillaging our women and we need to protect them. Mm-hmm. They're doing that. They're trying to do that. So shut the fuck up.
Well, a statistic I read yesterday actually on that is the more educated a man is, the more likely he is to be violent and sexually violent against women. And when you look at statistics, the more educated a woman is, the more likely she is to experience violence and sexual violence from a man. And then when you look at statistics on education, who are the most educated men? White men. So, they just fucking shut up. They're just not even right. But anything that Labour do, Trump and Musk are going to just try and smear. They're just going to shit on it because they want us to have the Conservatives back in because it's more in line with their agenda and what they want to do. And they know that they can probably push their ideas onto our government when we are Conservative and not Labour. And I'm so glad that we are Labour Party right now, because it would be terrifying if we weren't.
And even the fact of like, when Nigel Farage said that he doesn't agree that Tommy Robinson should be out of prison, and he agreed that it was inflammatory, and he's in there for that reason and it incited, because he doesn't want to actually be told that far right. Even he's got a line with that when he said that, Elon Musk said that Nigel Farage wasn't the man to lead the Reform Party to power. It's like, oh, you're not fascist enough. We need someone more fascist. Like, what?
After he was about to give him 100 million and was all like, yeah, Nigel Farage is my bestie and I'm going to give him all this money.
Yeah,
and
but you're not fascist enough.
It makes no sense. But you know what I'm thinking? Like, no matter how much we despise and disagree with Musk and Trump and Andrew Tate, I have never commented on one of their posts or anything about them ever. No matter how much I despise a person or a idea or how wrong something is, I'm not behind my keyboard going da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So all these people sending death threats and rape threats and whatever else to Jess Phillips, like, how? Like, okay, fine, you might disagree with her policies, you might not agree with Labour, you might not, but even so, how do you think that it's okay to be sending threats and being so violent and aggressive still? Like, that's what really gets me as well. It's like there's the disagreement and this is right and that is wrong and whatever, but at the end of the day, normal people of sane mind are not commenting horrible abuse to the people they disagree with. So if Trump and Musk are these type of people that are saying these things and just instigating death threats and things, what kind of people do you think they are? How
And
is it you want to
if
run
he
the country?
cared, yeah, exactly. And because he's going to be his like right hand man, isn't he? So, and if he cared for one, it tells you all you need to know. If he cared for 1 second about violence against women and girls, he would not be the right hand man to a convicted sex offender. So let's just see it how it is. And, and again, this whole kind of thing anyway of like a two-party race isn't beneficial for having like, for critical thinking, because if you sit there and go, well, I don't agree with it because Labour or because Conservative or because Reform, like you have to be able to look at decisions in isolation and go like, and that's how you're going to be more centralist in your views and saying, oh yeah, that was a good decision. Maybe don't agree with that one or that, but rather than it's bad because it's democratic or it's bad because it's like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a massive shining example of powerful white man says something confidently about something he is not informed on. Like you clearly haven't done any research, or if you have, you're just lying. Which one's worse?
Yeah, and they also speak the loudest.
Yeah,
It's
shouting the loudest.
yeah, just in this cycle of who can shout the most loudest bullshit and it get heard. And that's what wins you. That's what wins you a presidency, I'm afraid. Is there anything else in the because okay,
So
yeah.
just a little side note as well, just to if anybody hasn't seen it on the news, because as you said, some people haven't, and that's wild. About the group, the
In
rape group
Germany.
chat. Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, so there was the group chat found of 70,000 men all giving each other ideas on how to coerce their wives or girlfriends, friends, any women into having sex with them, how to drug them and rape them, how to get away with these things. This is 70,000 men in this group chat. And I was saying to you the other day how like my brother is very clued up on politics and he's always in the know and he always knows what's going on in the world news and this, that and the other, and I mentioned this to him and he had absolutely no idea. And I'm like, that just highlights how unimportant this has been. It just shows that for somebody who watches the news, listens to all the news, is very clued up on things, but didn't hear about this, it wasn't made big enough. How
Yeah.
is this not bigger? It's 70,000 men. It's outrageous. It's like, that's a
But yeah,
lot
it
of
shows
people.
it's scary that has just been dismissed. Like it should be everybody should be up in arms that exists. Like imagine there was a group chat of women that were threatening violence against men with 70,000 women in there. Like they'd be jailed. We'd be all on a lockdown. Like it'd
Thinking we were
be
mentally ill and they'd put us in camps and stuff to like lobotomize us. It's
it's absolutely incredible that this is the world isn't kind of or Europe isn't kind of stopping on dead in their tracks and going, what the hell is going on here? Because they were even I was watching some it's like a panorama-esque video on it, and they were saying like as the police were kind of shutting that down, there was more just popping up and they were just moving them across. Like there's pockets of it's not in isolation, there's pockets of these things everywhere, and it shows you like again like Lincoln's like the Dominique Pellico case, like how many of them were involved with that. Then that site existed. I think the site was called something like without her knowledge dot whatever. Like the fact that that site even exists shows that there is multiple thousands of Dominique Pellicos out there, right? And
yeah.
again, remember that he only got found out because he was caught videoing under a woman's skirt in a shop. Like if that never would have happened, this whole thing never would have had the lid blown off it, because the security guard rang the police. If that guy had never rang the police, we would never even know.
Oh, yeah, and those numbers would just be growing and growing. And then those men then go to other websites or form other groups, and it's just this web of dark, horrible, terrifying shit. This is why we only talk about this stuff once a week, because it's heavy.
It is heavy. It's very heavy. But March is tomorrow. Tomorrow
Yes,
afternoon.
no, yes, the UK marches. So this originally came about, I think, just because it was like in solidarity with the women in the US
Yeah.
and abortion rights. And they were like, right, we need to stand in solidarity with US women, but also to be like, we're not having that shit over here. So like, pay attention. We're saying now that's not happening over here. But ever since the start of these marches has been announced, so much more shit has happened against women that the list just grows of what it's about and who it's for. And so I had a client today that was like, oh, so what's your march about? And I was like,
How
I
long
don't
have you
know
got?
where to begin. Like everything, literally everything. The Taliban in Afghanistan, what's going on in America, what's going on over here. Like the gender-based violence is at its absolute worst. There's so many things to march about.
Yeah, 100%. And it's quite scary, and it is mad when you actually think, well, I don't. People, usually men, say like, oh well, I don't get it though. Like, what are women marching about? Like, you get equal pay now, and it's like, wow, you have no idea, like no idea. And it is, like you say, it's now turned into this whole thing of like, yeah, it was initially the weekend before the inauguration on Monday, but now it's like, let's just stand in solidarity for any woman that doesn't have the freedoms, ourselves included, because there's still a way to go in this country. But the fact, and I think what's kind of the thing that's not scaring, well, it is scaring me, I guess, is that like we've always had forward progression in history. Yeah, we're not there yet, but there's always been this bill is passed that protects women, this helps equality financially, this, that, the other. We've never known rollbacks like we are seeing now. Roe v. Wade. We've never, the rollbacks. It breaks my heart with Afghanistan because I think in England and in Western culture, it can be very like this thing that's fed of like, oh well, there's always been violence in the Middle East. There's always been this going on in the Middle East. Afghanistan was so progressive, like in the 80s, like women, and it's only a couple of years ago before they got back in power, like women were doctors, they owned salons, they had that choice about, how much they wanted to cover up. They had the choice, like, of how, how much they wanted to engage with that. To see what is going on now, not that it's like, it's not worse, but it's like these people had similar freedoms to you and I a few years ago. And that needs to really hit home, that it's not like, it hasn't, not that it's okay if it's always been this way, because it's not, but it hasn't always been that way in Afghanistan. And actually, like, these women have had these rights taken away from them. Like,
Yeah.
it's petrifying. And now it's like this latest things of that women are now legally can't access healthcare.
Yeah, so I think there's more and more coming out every other week at the moment, but so at first they were banned from education up until sixth grade. Some places completely banned, some places up to sixth grade. It kind of depends on the rules in the area. So they can't now become nurses or healthcare providers because they can't be educated. Then they were banned from being healthcare providers, and only 5% of Afghanistan women are working now. 5% of the female population is working over there, and that's only going to reduce. They are now banned from seeing male doctors. It's not allowed for a female to see a male doctor, but now female doctors can't exist either. So essentially, women in Afghanistan have no healthcare access whatsoever. They have banned windows from being built on buildings so that women can't be seen into or look out of the window to look over other women. They're not allowed to access parks or gyms. They're not allowed to speak in public. They're not allowed to sing. What else have I got here? They've enforced a strict dress code requiring women to wear full body coverings, including a burqa when they go outside. If they fail to comply to any of these rules, they can be fined or they can be physically punished, beaten, stoned, or thrown in jail. What else is there? Not allowed to take part in sports. They are not allowed to work in the government or in any NGOs. That's kind of obvious because they're not really allowed to work anywhere. And they've placed restrictions on being able to get divorce, inherit property, or move freely through the legal system without any male approval. So essentially, they have absolutely zero rights. And Afghanistan is now the worst ranked country in gender equality, obviously.
Yeah. And
And Becky
it's
made a point to me the other day. She said, so many people are sharing about the fires in LA. Nobody is sharing this. And I said, it's because LA feels close to home. It's like people go on holiday there, people know people there, people can connect and understand LA. Afghanistan feels a million miles away, almost like it's so far removed that it can't feel as shocking as it actually is for a lot of people, when actually the it's well, Malala Yousafzai spoke at the conference in Pakistan, in Islamabad, saying this is what did she call it? Let me get it right. I don't want to butcher this one. She spoke at the Muslim World League conference in Islamabad, calling on Muslim leaders to stand with Afghan women and girls in codifying gender apartheid as a crime of international law. So she's speaking up, and I don't know if you've read her book, but what a badass she is. But she is speaking up,
she's
saying,
also a Swiftie, just saying.
Swifty, oh my
Lala
God.
went to the Eras tour. Yeah,
That's
actually,
probably
sorry.
down.
Side note, fun fact. She posted about when she posted about the Eras tour. She posted about the first time that the Taliban were like toppled when she was still there, and the first song that they sang, her and her friends, they ran up to a hill and sang "Love Story" because they
Oh,
could sing in public, and
wow.
like that's why like then she's like that for me is like a big reminds me of that freedom, and then that's why she's like it's hitting obviously her twice as hard that it's been taken back and then some now.
Yeah, yeah. So it is absolutely shocking, and I'm not sure the where this is going to go for over there, because obviously the US have pulled out. They don't have the backing of NATO. The Taliban have just completely taken over. Yeah, it's sad times over there.
And that's the thing, like for when I think about it, it's like if these rights have been taken away, like surely then like they had their husbands would have been with these women when they were doctors, when they weren't having to completely cover up their hands and everything leaving the house. So what's their husband's opinion on this? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they not then? Is it not that okay? If you've still got the freedom, the men in society need to be standing up and saying like this is not okay because you are our voice. You know, I don't know.
Men would also be punished. The men would also be thrown in jail. They would be beaten. They would be fined. There's no way of speaking out against the Taliban at this point. I just think they would need a full uprising. But in order to do that, you've got to be able to speak and rally people, and that is all underground now. There's no way that's anything on the surface. So I
I
don't
just
know.
don't. I don't know why. Like obviously, you said like the LA fires. Like for me, and I completely agree. Like these all of these things can coexist, right? Because what I also don't like is when people do post about things like the LA fires and people are in the comments like, yeah, but what about Gaza? But what about Afghanistan? It's like it can coexist. Like I know for me, like one day I'll be sharing about Afghan women and the next I'll be sharing about LA because it all matters. And I think a lot of people, there are a lot of people that are more passive to it, but it can all coexist. It's not one without the other. We can have compassion for we don't have limited compassion. Like we can have compassion for everybody. But I don't understand why world leaders aren't as outright. Why? Not that I want to cause a war, obviously not. Why isn't that causing a war? We go to war for oil. Why the fuck? Are we, like, why are we not going in and being like, yep, this is not okay?
Yeah, and
Like,
NATO have said this is not good, and Afghanistan have said we don't give a fuck, and that's
yeah,
about it.
cool. See you later.
We've
Like,
said that we're not happy with this, and they've gone, yeah, we really don't care. We're going to do it anyway. So, bye. That's basically it. And it's yeah.
why did not that I'm gonna sit here and pretend like America and the UK are Western saviors because we know that's not the case. But like, why did they pull out when they were there?
From what I gather, from what I know, is that Trump did a deal with the Taliban and basically said if we remove our troops, it's basically like a peace treaty with the Taliban, right? And they both upheld that. But what the US didn't navigate or negotiate or enforce was a treaty or a peace treaty with the Taliban and the Afghan government. So as soon as the US started pulling out troops from Afghanistan, the Taliban just went in and took over because the US hadn't put in any foundations to protect the Afghan government. So the Taliban came in and there was just masses of people trying to flee the country, and the Taliban took over and it was quick.
And that's petrifying. It's like, is that again? It's like that forecast forward of like these sorts of agreements. It's like, well, it's an agreement, but it's okay. It just comes at the cost of women's rights, but it's fine, you know?
Yeah, it's such a complicated web of everything, because that war had been going on for so long, and there was, American troops living over there, and you could see it from both sides of whether to stay or go, but obviously what wasn't done was the protection of the people of Afghanistan when they pulled out.
Yeah, it's petrifying. Like, I just don't understand how it can be going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can understand it in the sense that women's rights are just through the absolute floor worldwide, globally. Like, as soon as a woman is a woman from birth, they've got less rights and less respect, and we're just seen less than in society, and that's just globally. It's different across different nations, but in countries in the Middle East, it's obviously even worse. And so, as shocking and disgusting and awful as this is, when you zoom out and you look at women's rights and the history of women's rights, it isn't surprising that this has happened, that a group of men are oppressing women.
Yeah, shock.
It's not a shocker. It's just the way that they're going about it is so aggressive and in your face. America are removing rights to abortion. The Taliban are removing windows from buildings.
Yeah.
Just...
It is.
So that's why we're marching tomorrow. And we hope that having these conversations just helps other people then have these conversations, and there's like a little ripple effect of, I didn't know that, and I'm going to talk to somebody else about that because it's pissed me off, and then they talk about that with somebody else, and you never know where it lands. A journalist might get a story, or a friend might be part of a charity, or you've got no idea where these conversations go. So it's important that we do keep talking about it, because the worst thing that can happen is that we stop talking about it and we stop giving a shit.
We just accept it and normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing. It's, we don't have to, because we've spoken about this before, right? Of like, this stuff is heavy, and when we are like looking at and researching things for podcasts and diving into stuff, like, it is like, holy shit, like this is a lot. And then you sometimes feel a bit defeated because you're like, well, we're not in politics, we're not leaders, like we can't flick a switch and we can't change this stuff. But think about, like, if we think about our immediate lives, and this is something, again, like coming back to things like men who believe certain rhetorics around women, like I know how much my quality of life has transformed by coming out of relationships that I've noticed these things in, and being with somebody who values me and believes in equal rights. Like, that's changed my world, because that's what I know, that's what we know is our immediate world, right? So it's like, you can make so much change to your surrounding world, the people that surround you, and their lives as well, by having these conversations. You don't know a friend who is in an abusive relationship that isn't recognizing these signs. You just don't know. And actually, when we make change at grassroots level, it changes our worlds and our friends' worlds and our colleagues' worlds. But also, when that starts to have a bigger effect on grassroots, that's how we start to move up the pyramid. So any conversation and any small change is always worth it. And like, even if you learned something today, or you thought, do you know what, I didn't think about it like that, or I didn't realise that, like, that is a step forward. And this is why these marches and things are so important, to just bring the awareness to this. And I see it with, like, definitely my parents have, had this kind of constant rhetoric and culture of, like, the tabloid headlines of, like, we blame these people and this is wrong and this is right. And even having these conversations with, like, my mum in particular, I've seen the transformation in her, like, of like, wow, yeah, I didn't realise that, or I didn't think about it in that way. And it does just take, us coming together and platforming these issues. So whatever you do, it's big or small, even if you just have a conversation with someone off the back of this, like, you're doing your bit.
Exactly. Even if it's explaining to your brother or uncle or your male partner or whoever it is, even just like what feminism is, because they probably have this idea of what feminism is and what a feminist is, and that's not them and they're not about that. But even just gently reminding them that it's about equality for both people, and that all starts from the home. Gender equality starts in the home. That's like, we will do an episode on this, but sharing chores is like just one big, like small step in making those changes. So these conversations do matter. So talk with your friends, talk with your families, send us messages. Like, let's just keep the conversation going about these things, because that is how change will happen.
And realistically, probably a lot of people actually are feminists. They just don't realise it. And I saw someone say something the other day and I thought that's so true. Feminism shouldn't be a word, because feminism should be the default. Feminism isn't something that should be different from the default. You are a person who believes in equality, or you're a misogynist.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we're kind of hitting home. Is like, majority of people, you probably do believe in these things. You probably are a feminist. Like, start bringing it to light.
Probably, yeah. It was probably to group us and be like, they're that type of person.
It's to put people on the outside.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I'm trying to think, is there a word when you're either racist or you're not. Like, you're not born racist. Racist. So it's like you kind of just born this like level normal person, and then you become and learn these things. Yeah. So yeah, let's remove feminism.
We're not feminists, we're just people, and you're misogynistic if you don't believe in equality.
Yeah. Right, well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode. Drop us a message,
Okay, therapy session.
Go for a walk. Honestly, go for a walk now. That will be the best thing for you. Yeah. I'm going to do that.
Right, have a good one, and we'll see you on the flip side of the marches, so we're excited to talk to you about them.
Yeah. See you soon, guys. Bye.